Unit 8, Topic 12. Recalling finding the slope, midpoint, or length. So for our first skill, let's look at slope. So we're going to find that slope is the rise from one point to another, and then the run from one point to the other. So the rise are the y's, so we're going to take y2 minus 1y1 in an ordered pair, and divide it by our run, x2 minus x1 in an ordered pair. Once we have a slope, we can compare the two lines and decide if they are parallel. That is, the slopes must be the same. So for example, if you had one slope equals 2/3 and the second slope also 2/3, they would be parallel. We can use slope to determine if two lines are perpendicular as well. To be perpendicular, the slopes must be negative reciprocals. So for example, if the first slope equals 2/3 and the second slope equals -3/2, then both lines would be perpendicular. All right, but note, if one slope was 2/3 and the other slope was just 3/2, the lines would be neither. They have to be negative reciprocals. So let's use coordinates to find our slope. Line M passes through -1, 3 and 4, 1. Line T passes through -2, -1 and 3, -3. Are the two lines parallel? So step 1, find the slope of line M. So line M has points -1, 3 and 4, 1. So taking our slope equation, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, we'll label our points. -1, 3 will be x1, y1, and 4, 1 will be x2, y2. So plugging it in, y2 minus y1 would become 1 minus 3, and x2 minus x1 will become 4 minus -1. So evaluating 1 minus 3 is -2, and 4 minus -1 becomes 5. Therefore, the slope of line M is -2/5. Step 2, we'll find the slope of line T. So they tell us that line T passes through points -2, -1 and 3, -3. So taking that exact same slope equation, we'll label our x1, y1, -2, -1, and our x2, y2, 3, -3. So plugging it in, we find that y2 minus y1 is -3 minus -1, and x2 minus x1 is 3 minus -2. Simplifying, we find that the slope of line T is -2/5. So our final step, compare the slopes and see if they represent lines that are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So because -2/5 is equal to -2/5, the lines are parallel. So now let's try to find slope using graphing. Given the shape below, is T0 perpendicular to OP? All right, so remembering that slope equals rise over run, where rise is up or down. So if we find the slope of T0, we go down 1, 2. So our rise is -2 because we went down 2. Then counting our run, I see that we go over 1, 2, 3. So because we went to the right 3, we ran +3. So the slope of TO is -2/3. Now let's find the slope of OP. Remembering that slope equals rise over run, we'll check to see how far we rise. So starting at O, we go up, or I'm sorry, starting at P, we go down 1, 2, 3. So we find that we have -3 over, going left 1, 2. Because we went left, it's -2, which simplifies to +3/2. So because -2/3 and 3/2 are negative reciprocals, that is, the sign changes and our fraction flips, TO and OP are perpendicular. Now let's remember our midpoint. All right, we'll start with our midpoint formula. So midpoint is the exact middle of a line. It's the center point of a line. And we're going to find that if we take x2 plus x1 and divide it by 2, that's going to be our x component of the midpoint. And if we take y2 plus y1, divide by 2, that's going to be our y component of the midpoint. So, coordinates midpoint. Segment M starts at -1, 3 and ends at 4, 1. What is the midpoint of segment M? So let's label it. x1, y1 will be -1, 3, and 4, 1 will be our x2, y2. So because midpoint is x2 plus x1 over 2 and y2 plus y1 over 2, we'll find that our midpoint is going to equal 4 plus -1 over 2, comma, 1 plus 3 over 2, which is going to simplify. 4 plus -1 is 3 over 2, and 1 plus 3 is 4 over 2. All right. Simplifying further, I think that 3 halves cannot be simplified, but 4 halves, 4 divided by 2, is 2. So our final midpoint is going to be 3 halves 2. Note, we say midpoint, so it makes sense that it would be an ordered pair, a single point on a graph. Using our graphing, we're going to take the shape below and find the midpoint of TS. So starting out, we'll identify that our T, -2, 0, is our x1, y1. And our S, at 0, 4, is going to be our x2, y2. We can now take our points and plug them into our formula. So x2 plus x1 is going to be 0 plus -2 over 2, and y2 plus y1 is going to be 4 plus 0 over 2. Simplifying, 0 plus -2 is -2 over 2, and 4 plus 0 over 2 is 4 over 2. I see that -2 over 2 will simplify to -1, and 4 over 2 simplifies to 2. Now, let's look at length. So, length is going to be the square root of x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. On our formula sheet, we'll find the circle with center hk and radius r. Notice the similarities between these two formulas. So, coordinates for length. Segment M starts at -1, 3 and ends at 4, 1. What is the length of segment M? So, starting out, we'll take our length formula and identify our x and y. So, -1, 3 will be our xy pair, and 4, 1 will be our hk pair. So, we'll take those values and plug them in to the formula. So, length is going to equal x minus h, -1 minus 3 squared, plus y minus k, or 3 minus 1 squared. Remember, we're always going to simplify our parentheses first, so our length is going to equal -1 minus 3 is -4 squared, plus 3 minus 1 is 2 squared. So when we square these terms, remember that a negative squared becomes a positive. So the length is going to equal the square root of -4 squared, which is positive 16, plus 2 squared, which is 4. Simplifying, we find that the length equals the square root of 20. At this point, we have two options. Option 1 is to simplify our radical. So I know that the square root of 20 is the square root of 4 times 5, because 4 times 5 is 20. I can then break it up into my two square roots. Square root of 4 times the square root of 5, and I know that the square root of 4 is 2. So I end up with 2 square roots of 5. The second option is that I can take that square root of 20 and plug it into my calculator. And I see that the square root of 20 is about 4.47. So my solution is 2 square root of 5, or about 4.47. So let's use graphing to find the length. Given the shape below, what is the length of SP? Like before, let's find the ordered pair for S and the ordered pair for P. So S is at 0, 3, and P is at 1, 2, 3, up 1. So taking our formula, we'll label our XY pair and our HK pair. 0, 3 can be our XY, and 3, 1 can be our HK. It doesn't matter which is which, so long as X is with Y and H is with K. Taking these values into our formula, we find that length is X minus H squared, 0 minus 3 squared, plus Y minus K squared, 3 minus 1 squared. Simplifying, we find that the length is going to be negative 3 squared plus 2 squared. So we'll find that the length is the square root of 9 plus 4. Or the length is the square root of 13. Because the square root of 13 is in simplest form, we're done, though we will check that it's about equivalent to 3.61.